Yeah, good morning, everybody, here in Brussels, but also online. Very much welcome to this Chat and Chill, Boys and Men as Allies in Achieving Gender Equality. I'm very happy with this Chat and Chill. The formula is as such that we make this as informal as possible. But I also know that we, after 25 minutes, will conclude that we haven't been able to discuss everything. So also feel this as an invitation to continue the conversation after the next 24 minutes. My name is Dennis van der Veur. I'm working for the agency as head of outreach and engagement. And together with my team, particularly also mentioning our great trainee Olivia, who is not here, but who has been the mastermind of this session, we found it very important to have a discussion on boys and men. And let me make this a little bit more personal. I joined the agency about 3 years ago, and still also in my circles with my family and friends, too often I got the question, but gender equality, that's women's rights, and what do men do there? And things that many of you in the room have heard. And this issue has come back also in discussions we have internally and with stakeholders. So it's very important to have this discussion, not only in the 25 minutes, but overall. And I hope that you found it also enough mainstreamed in some of the discussions already in the last 2 days. I have two great guests with whom we have been speaking also before, who I would like to introduce themselves firstly, and then we get into the conversation. We start with Martin Speer, please.
Directly hand over to Helene.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Well, great to see you all. Let's chat and chill together on this important topic. Thank you, Dennis, for putting this on the agenda. My name is Helene Banner. I am the founder of Let's Just Be Imperfect Ladies. That's my own business, and initially I started it after my 10-year career at the European Commission. I was a spokesperson, speechwriter for the president of the European Commission at a very young age, and having been that young woman in the room very often, I created a business to support more women in leadership roles, to feel confident in my work, and that brings me here today and working with Martin. I noticed in order to really support women in the workplace, I need to talk to men, and I need to learn how to communicate and build bridges to those in power, mostly above the glass ceiling, men. So thank you for coming, and let's discuss that today.
And I'm Martin. I'm working a lot with those men. I'm part of the team of authors and consultants Herr and Speer with my colleague Vincent Emmanuel Herr. He's an historian, sociologist, I'm an economist. And in our work, we focus a lot on the concept and approach of male allyship. And how can we really get men on board, join the quest, have conversations really on eye level, and get into the circles of power and activate and embrace change in those circles that we really move forward this quest.
Exactly, that's what we're going to discuss here. And let me start indeed with that very first question. How successful have we been so far in including men and boys in these discussions?
I have two feelings within me on this question. There is hope in me and there's concern. On the hope part, I see a growing number of men, also young men, who are open towards a more gender equal society and work environment, or even actively work for it. But then I see maybe that's a quarter to a third of young or of men overall. And also, as we can see in studies, there's a third of men who basically stay silent, who are neutral, who don't really speak up. And there's a quarter to a third of men, and I think maybe you've also seen recent data on it, who are actively working against or really are having an attitude that is not in favor of gender equality. And this third of men, also young men, a growing number of young men, really concerns me. We've seen this recent poll from the UK that over 40% of young guys from the UK really like Andrew Tate, this social media guy who isn't really a big supporter of gender equality. But let's jump back to this 1/3 of men who are in favor of it. Even they are in favor of it, they're often lacking the tools. And so I'm really happy that today we will also talk about the tools. How can we activate them and provide them with the tools to really be effective in moving forward in this topic?
Yeah, and when we think of progress, we actually have a question for you, just to see, maybe with a show of hands. In the organization you work in, if you work in an organization, university, company, are you aware of any female leadership training or support for women in leadership positions? Then raise your hand. You know, in which organization do you know in your there is support for women in management roles? Okay, we have some. That's fantastic. And are you aware that in your organization there's also support for men as allies or men in leadership positions? Okay.
Fewer.
We have a few, okay, and that's fantastic to hear, because when we think of what is the progress in, involving men in gender equality, my observation, having done a lot of authentic leadership trainings for women, is that more and more institutions, more and more organizations also realize we cannot just empower the women to become strong leaders and to be part of power. We also need to talk to those who are currently above the glass ceiling and who cannot just continue, as usual, but they also need support. And these are the trainings that you are offering, Martin, with Vincent on male allyship. But where I don't see progress yet, and I want to make the point, because to me it's an elephant in the room, and I love talking about taboos in my work, is that in reality we also need to talk about the root of the problem. You were just talking about the 1/3 of men who are openly or actively against gender equality or progress in that area. And to me, having been the young woman, or often the only woman in rooms of power, and having been the one who may have felt intimidated or even subtly, always with those subtle, invisible, perhaps gestures that were perhaps not even intended, I fully understand that. I have observed as that young woman that the root of the problem is often a fear of loss of power. Will I still be a strong leader if there's this young lady here in the room, which was me, who's not my secretary, who's not the intern, but who's my counterpart at the negotiation table? So I saw that there were power gestures towards me, and I can still observe that with many groups who are not yet represented, that there are these intimidating gestures, intimidating taking of space, interrupting, all of these subtle, sometimes invisible barriers to power. And that, to me, and we need to spell it out, is a confidence issue of many men. And I say that with a lot of compassion, because I work with so many amazing men who I have seen, and I can see it today with a lighthearted, because I've been working a lot on this, who I could see they were lacking the tools to communicate with me as their counterpart with respect and in a professional way, even if I could have been their daughter, even if I'm a young woman. And my question to the future is, and this is really the question I think we need to talk about when we want to make progress, how can we support men in power positions to still feel confident and to be confident leaders, even if the composition of the boardroom changes, even in a changing time where leadership means something else, something more diverse, even if the colors, identities, experiences change in decision-making rooms. How can men still feel confident? We need to give them the tools and spell it out, in my opinion.
Let's make this a little bit more concrete. Can you give us a case example, a typical example, or any example about a man you worked with and how you addressed this issue with him?
Yeah, the first thing I want to be honest about, I was so young, I didn't address it. And I want to say that on behalf of so many women who, in those moments, just freeze, who are like, I'm confident. I'm a professional. I was a spokesperson of the European Commission. Of course, I could do my job. I was coming into so many meeting rooms, and I was super prepared, and everything was ready. And still, it was sufficient that there was one look sometimes, or one gesture. Again, often not intended actively, but it still felt to me freezing, and I lost confidence, and I thought, it's me, it's probably the clothes I'm wearing, or maybe I did say something wrong. So that is the first thing I want to say. I didn't address it. I projected it back on me, and I know that many, women or anyone who's in a group who's not yet represented so much in power may feel like that. And that's how I transformed it today. And what I tell women today in my trainings on how to address it is, number one, realize that this has nothing to do with you. These are intimidating gestures. If we feel intimidated, and if we cannot show up as ourselves and with our voice in that room safely, then nothing is wrong with us, but something's wrong with the room and the work culture there. This is the first thing, to come back to ourselves and think, okay, something's wrong with this situation or with this person, but not with me. This is to stay strong here in the core, and to realize if I feel intimidated, it's probably in reality this person who's intimidated by me because I look differently. Maybe I have a different gender or experience or nationality or accent or hair. And to stay, focused on what we wanted to say, and to realize even if we may be alone in that situation, we're not, because we need to keep going with our voice.
And working with a man in a high leadership position, how do you work with him?
Yeah, maybe we can first ask Martin, because you work in so many male spaces, and I'm happy to come back.
Good.
I mean, I think there are different angles. One is really making it a topic. Often when institutions, companies offers keynotes, trainings, about this topic, mainly women show up. Mainly those people show up who are already on board, but not those who have questions, those who have concerns, those who maybe should and need to move forward. And often it's about the angle. So what title has the format? Does it actively also approach men within the organization, or is it happening somewhere but not proactively communicated? And also the format itself, does it offer a space to start a conversation on eye level? Does it also provide room and space for the concerns men are having? Because often we see in our work, working with hundreds of men over the last years, that there are questions, that there are concerns, but they're often not actively spoken out. Or sometimes also male leaders in top positions don't really have the language or the words to express what's going on within them. And then not speaking it out, you keep it in yourself, and this is not really a very healthy thing. I mean, I think a lot of men practice this. And at the same time, it's also not giving the organization and teams the opportunity to move forward and grow. So I think there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of language, words, and there's a lack of providing those spaces for this conversation. Because as you said before, when we work with men, they're complaining, there are those female leadership trainings, what is about us? Okay, I don't know if you need it, but yes, I think you have a point that we need those spaces where we together can have a conversation about why we need progress, how does it work, and how can everyone be part of this journey forward?
Yeah, and I can only confirm this experience being a communicator myself. It is definitely, in order to build bridges, we need to stop lecturing or blaming or shaming, which I understand that we may sometimes do that because we have made experiences that are painful, hurtful, perhaps, having been excluded and frustrated. But there's also, I understand, so much frustration for so many men in leadership roles who say, oh, my career is over. It seems that because of the quota that I have to step aside. And I agree with you, Martin, we need to give those spaces where men can actually voice that openly and safely as well, even if it may not always be the right thing to say. I realize listening first is very important. taken seriously, seeing eye to eye level, because when we start lecturing, my experience is, of course, what happens, the other side closes down, because when somebody feels attacked, you cannot really communicate, build bridges anymore. But if we really say, for example, this is what I do in my trainings with men now, is I really share openly how I felt as a woman in a meeting room when I was the only woman or one of the few, without blaming, but just sharing the experience. And if we talk to that, let's say 1/3 of men who are generally open and who do not have the intention to discriminate anyone, even not with subtle gestures, they're most of the time like, I had no idea that this happens to you on a daily basis. So just sharing the personal experience is so powerful.
And often they don't know about those moments you were just, I think, hinting on. Taking space with your body, how you use your language. Are we talking on eye level or like this? And a lot of guys and also male leaders aren't aware of those nuances in communication, in decision making, how it's shaping an organization, how it's feeling us accepted or overlooked. And often this is mind-blowing and opening if you say to a guy, be a better listener, interrupt less, truly listen,
and believe women when they talk about their experience. This is another thing you are also sharing.
Many thanks for this first round. Amazing. I'm just trying to visualize, suppose that I would be one of your trainees coming to your event, and I think this is typically a weekend type of, or a series of workshops. I'm fascinated by when in that process you see people loosening up literally and indeed opening up, because this is a process, I guess, and it's not so simple. It's a matter of time. So what is that trigger point in the process that you see, like, because you have that experience by now, I think.
Yeah, I usually do these trainings over several weeks. So we see us again every week or every 2 weeks, because there's so much happening in between. And this is a technique that you are also applying. I ask them in between the sessions to interview one professional colleague in the workplace and one woman in their private life, on how it feels to be, for example, a woman in the workplace, if they have ever been, have ever experienced sexism, for example, in a public space or in the workplace. And this personal experience of, oh my God, my wife, I've never really realized that she's being catcalled on the street, on the bus, or that this happens to her at work. It's often these aha moments, epiphany, that is happening around me. And this is often opening them up, and in my experience, it opens up the men I work with to question, so what can I do now? I want to do something about this, and this is the moment.
Martin?
At the same time, it frustrates me that us guys need those education, this personal connection, that we don't get the realization when looking at a Guardian or Spiegel article. I mean, all the data is out there. You have eyes, you have ears to listen. So it frustrates me, but looking at my personal experience, I actually also needed people in my personal surrounding to make me more aware. But the interesting thing is, it was other guys who started having a conversation with me. And maybe that could be a powerful role also of male allies, that us guys also among us start talking about those topics. Why stereotypical gender roles aren't a healthy thing. Why working, breathing, living life on eye level is the way forward. And I really think we guys should also take over our responsibility in learning about this issue, talking about the topic, and yes, have those conversations. I think they're so powerful, but also do our homework, and I think it needs both.
Yeah. I want to go to the audience, and to be more precise, to Ellie Kaplani, who we invited to speak a little bit about a project with a fascinating name, Reboot Now, and focus a little bit on one aspect of working with men and boys, not the only one, but when it comes to violence, gender-based violence. And yeah, explain a little bit what you do in that project, Reboot Now.
Thank you very much. So El Kaplani, I'm a senior researcher at CMOP, Social Action Innovation Center. It's one of the oldest civil society organizations in Greece dedicated to social impact. And in the context of this initiative, we found out some interesting findings that I'm very happy to share with you today. Starting from something that a young boy said, "I prefer not to talk about my feelings to psychologists." These were the words of a 14-year-old boy who shared it during our work on gender-based violence prevention through psychological counseling with more than 700 students, junior high school students, during the 2022-2023 school year in Greece. His words stayed with us because they echoed common perceptions around stereotypes and males' self-expression and involvement with what may be stereotypically believed to be a female concern. Boys' reluctance was quite clear during the individual sessions where they made up just 38% of the participants. But when we looked at the group sessions, this story changed because we saw that girls and boys participated almost equally. This shift showed us that young males' reluctance was likely not about disinterest, but rather perhaps more about the environment and the context of the intervention. And we at CMOP think that this takes roots at how many boys grow up with the misconception that gender-based violence is not their concern. Also seeing what the young children told us. They see it sometimes as something that only concerns girls, or often feel labeled as perpetrators because of their gender and regardless of their own views and their own behaviors. And this, along with the persistence of stigma around mental health and mental health support, as well as the perception that men should be tougher or less emotional than girls, can be very discouraging for them to engage in discussions that could actually empower them to be allies and advocates. Likely, the collective environment of the group sessions seemed to feel safer and less judgmental for the young males, while being surrounded by peers. And with this equal participation that we saw, this created a sense of belonging, making it easier for them to express themselves and engage in an issue from which they're often left out. In our opinion, these findings underline the urgent truth that we need to focus on awareness-raising actions, not just to combat gender-based violence, but to ensure that boys and young men understand their essential role in preventing it. To truly tackle this, we must demystify the perception that gender-based violence is a female-only issue and confront the stereotypes that perpetuate violence, meaning that boys need to feel that they're part of the solution, not sidelined or stigmatized. And simply involving them is not enough. We must also create safe and inclusive spaces, environments where they feel encouraged to express themselves openly, where they feel part of a collective effort inspired by the power of shared goals and shared voices. And to our opinion, this collective efficacy is key. Group settings and youth-led initiatives can help young people feel empowered to take an active role in shaping a more equal future. But this work can't stop with students. To achieve lasting change, we saw that we also need to engage parents, teachers, and the wider community, because it's only through this collective effort that we can challenge the cultural norms that perpetuate harmful cycles. And just to share with you one of the most exciting things that we've learned during this initiative, it is that the best solutions come from young people themselves. That when we involve them in every phase of the process, when we listen to their concerns, their needs, and their ideas, they step up. And that's why tailored and youth-led actions are so powerful. because this kind of leadership for children and young people, it doesn't just foster engagement, it creates ownership, pride, and lasting change. So ultimately, this work is about more than addressing gender-based violence. It's about co-creating a world where empathy, equality, and respect are the norm. And in this sense, we, to our perception, we need to give young people the tools, the space, and the support they need to lead, because when they lead, change doesn't just happen, it lasts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Where can people find more information about Reboot, if they want?
Of course, in our website, kmop.org, you can find information about this initiative and other initiatives around gender equality and more. Thank you.
We have time for a very few questions. I see young men in the room, and I also know people from Men Engage are here, so I would like to, please here. Please, the mic. We go on a few minutes. Yeah. Still, I need to wrap this up. Yeah, please.
Thank you for interesting and very important conversation. As a young man and also youth participant, in my environment, I see a growing trend among young men in very radical, extreme right-wing radicalization. And what can we do to stop this trend? What can I, or maybe what can young people in like low parts as a social activist, what can we do to stop this trend?
1 minute answer.
Very short answer is support young men to feel confident through themselves, not through external status or material success, but really give them this self-belief in themselves. This is very important, to support them in their personality. It's very important. Very
Martin?
short answer.
Ask people like Helena to visit you. No, but also really giving them the idea that times of change are also times of opportunity for them, and that patriarchy isn't always a nice thing for guys, and we really have to wake up that feminism is also freeing us and is an opportunity for us guys too. And really, I think this idea could be embraced more, also among us guys.
Good. Many thanks, everybody. I need to close this session because there's a group waiting, but they will be around very quick. Yeah.
Helena Valas, Ministry with the long name from Slovenia. Okay, so my question is, do you think that the situation in the power rooms would change if you would increase the number of quotas? Which means that adding a number of female doesn't mean that they lose their jobs or their positions or power. So would that change the perception of men?
Quota.
Yes, of course it does. For number one, quotas mean that still 50% of the people in power will be men. That's the first argument. And second, yes, of course, representation matters. Of course it would change a room. But I need to add, it's not the only solution. We cannot again put it on the burden of the women or those who are underrepresented to do all the job. We need to still train and support the men in power.
Many thanks. Chat and chill, too short, but they will be around at the forum, so talk to them in the lunch breaks. Many thanks everybody for being here.